is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the KindaFunny Xcast, your home for all things Xbox here at KindaFunny. Of course, I'm one of your hosts, Snowbike Mike, and today we're kicking off the podcast just a little different because we got a very special episode coming your way later in the show. Myself and Parris Lilly will sit down with the head of ID at Xbox, Chris Charla, for an awesome interview, but I wanted to welcome you all into the show before that happens. So let me hit you with some housekeeping, and then we'll jump right into that special interview. Of course, this is the KindaFunny Xcast. We post each and every Saturday at 6 a.m. West Coast, Best Coast time on YouTube.com/KindaFunnyGames, RoosterTeeth.com, and of course on podcast services around the globe. Wanted to take a quick moment and say, hey, to all you audio listeners and viewers over on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning into the podcast, being part of the conversation, and just celebrating Xbox and video games with myself and the team here at the KindaFunny Xcast. We're so excited for this week, and I can't wait to bring you this awesome interview. Don't forget that we are now Epic Games partners, which means if you're upgrading your look in Fortnite, if you're making your car look dope in Rocket League, or maybe you're going out there and winning those crowns in Fall Guys and you want some V-Bucks or buying some games off the Epic Games Store, you can use our Epic Creator Code at checkout, KindaFunny, anytime to help support the team in a brand new way. It's no additional cost to you, and you can help support us, which would be really, really awesome. And talking about support, I want to give a big shout out to our Patreon producers for the month of April, to everybody that supports us on Patreon. Thank you all so, so much. But a big shout out to our Patreon producers, Gordon McGuire, Fargo Brady, Pranksky, Dan Golden, Spider B, Tyler Ross, Delaney Twinning, First Responder ND, Julian the Gluten-Free Gamer, James Hastings, and Casey Andrews. Thank you all so much for your support. And also along the lines of support, we want to give a big shout out to our sponsors this week. The KindaFunny Xcast is brought to you by MeUndies and Maple Story, but myself and the team will tell you all about that in just a little bit. Let's get into it. A very special episode coming your way. Myself and Parris Lilly are going to sit down with the head of ID at Xbox, Chris Charla, to talk about that program and all things indie games. Let's have some fun. Let's jump to that now. Welcome in, everybody. It's your guy, Snowbike Mike, and I'm joined, of course, with my co-host, Mr. Parris Lilly, and a very special guest. But I'll get to that in just a second. Parris, how are you today, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, sir. How are you doing?
I'm good, Parris. I'm really excited because today we have an awesome special guest. We have the head of ID at Xbox, Chris Charla, joining us. And so we got a fun little interview where it's all about him and his awesome team and the things they do over at Xbox and all the awesome indie games that they bring to light. So let's jump over there. Chris, what's going on, my friend? How are you today?
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, so good, Chris. We're happy to have you, and I'm really excited to talk with you. Parris, you feeling good about Chris? You excited to have him?
No, I'm excited. ID at Xbox is something I've wanted to talk about for a long time, so why not go directly to the source?
Oh, I like that. I like that. Well, we're going to jump right into that, but first, Parris, we got to find out what's he been playing lately. Chris, what have you been playing? What's the game that you've been jumping into?
Tunic. I just been playing Tunic. I kind of have to. I brought my Xbox down to GDC with me. I threw it in a backpack, and then you stay in a hotel and you think everything will just work, and then like the TV didn't work. So I was like, you don't need a TV. You don't need a TV. But look, there's a Target. So I have a new TV, and then trying to get the Wi-Fi to work, but it's like hard with the hotel and the thing. So I ended up tethering it to my phone. But I did get like a solid 4 or 5 hours of Tunic in at GDC, and then now that I'm back, work's really busy, but I'm behind everybody, right? But I finished the swamp, and I'm looking around for the different heroes' graves. So that's not a spoiler, I don't think, to anybody. So I hope not. Sorry if it is. But I'm loving it. It's like one of those things you just that's a game where we saw that, really early. I think we saw it the same time everybody else saw it when it first debuted. It was in the Indie Mega booth up at PAX West, and everybody, I was glued to it for the whole time. And then, the whole show, I was getting texts from all these people who work at Microsoft in Xbox, outside of Xbox, like, you seen this game with the Fox? And we're just lurking around the booth trying to talk to people. And so we always knew the game was special, right? And we had it on stage at E3 and everything. The game is really special, and then you start playing it and you're like, oh my God, I had no idea. I knew it was special, but I didn't know like I didn't know it was this special, like, and you see the manual and you think like, oh, it's so cool to have this like really nice manual. It's like the pause screen, and then you start to learn, and I won't do any spoilers, but you start to realize just how deep it is and just how I'm in love, like I have it, like it's just so good. So yeah, I've been playing that, and then I've been playing a lot of DS because I sort of got back into collecting DS games. So that's just like I don't know, hobby is, and then I play a lot. I still play I play a lot of Geometry Wars, like between meetings, just to get that 30-second relaxation. I have a TV right behind my monitor, and so.
Parris Lilly, he's bringing up some great games here. I know a lot of people are going to start jumping up about Geometry Wars, which we'll talk about in a little bit for sure.
Oh yeah, he's throwing some heat. So it's funny you say that, Chris. Excuse me. Geometry Wars was actually the first achievement I ever got on the Xbox 360 because I went to the 0 Hour event back in 2005 for the launch, and that was first game I played. And I got an achievement on it. But I actually have a question for you. And we definitely want to go into the origins of ID at Xbox and really talk about all that. But you bring up Tunic, and the story that you just told made me think about something. So how does that process actually work for a game like that you're obviously seeing yourself at PAX West and you're kind of talking internally about it? But how does that process work to get that as a part of the ID at Xbox program?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because it can go a lot of different ways, right? Obviously, there's a lot of people who have a game and it's early and they know about ID. Maybe they've shipped a game before, maybe they haven't. They apply to the program, and then and we end up getting to see a build or learn about the game that way. And then there's other games where we don't, right? Where we see the game first and we're like, hey, what are your console plans? Have you thought about Xbox? And we should talk. And there's like a lot of support we can give and that kind of thing. And so it kind of goes both directions. And then the other thing that happens a lot is we'll get introductions, right? Where somebody will be like, oh, hey, my friend is making this game. I told him you should talk to you, like, and you kind of get connected that way. And so, it's amazing how many different ways games come into the ecosystem, from like our standard front door, which is just xbox.com/ID, to introductions from people, or we see something on Twitter, or somebody sees us on Twitter, or just like literally this morning, a high school student, I think she's a high school student from Australia, like hit me up on LinkedIn and was like, oh, how do I do, and so it's like it's just really neat, it can come any kind of direction.
Wow, that's really rad, is right. And that's a cool one I think we want to dive into first, is like talking about the ID at Xbox program. Of course, I want to hear your history of how you got involved with it. But I think to start off, for all of our viewers and listeners out there, can you give us the description of what is the ID at Xbox program? What does it do for developers?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, a lot of people have heard of it, but you don't need to have heard of it because it's not. It's but what we are is we're the program at Microsoft that enables independent developers to self-publish their games digitally on Xbox, on Windows Store, and every place else. And so that's it in a nutshell.
That's it as a nutshell. All right, let's jump into it. Then it's like
there's more to it. Yeah, there's more.
I was just saying, because you gave the easy answer, and I like that right there. A very general answer. But let's talk about how you got involved, because you have a really cool history in the video games industry, and it's evolved so much. Now you're the head of ID at Xbox. How did you start off with ID at Xbox, and where did this idea come from?
Yeah, so I've worked at Microsoft for since 2010, and before that, I was an independent developer, and before that, I was a journalist, IGN, and some magazines and stuff like that. And but when I was as a developer, we just fell in love with digital distribution. Like, Parris, you're just talking about your first day with the 360, and I remember, my first day with the 360, I was in Massachusetts at my mother-in-law's house. Like, I waited out in freezing rain with no jacket for 3 hours to get my little card at Best Buy so I could get the thing. And then I bought literally the first game I saw, and got back to, grandma's house and set it all up. And I'll be honest, the first game, it was like a port from another system, and it was not great. Right. And it looked a lot like a last gen game. But, you get that with, new, day one, new games on new systems. And I remember my wife kind of looking at me like, "You got pneumonia for this?" And I was like, "Oh, no, this is really good. This I know this console is going to be great." And then we got on the internet and just started downloading like some of those first Xbox Live Arcade games, a couple of which my company had worked on. But the second we started doing that, it was like, this is the future. You know what I mean? Like this is like, I'm at home and I'm bored, and now I just got this game, and I ended up taking that game back. And it was just like, this is just where the world is going. And so my company at the time, we just went all in on Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network as well. Just like making a ton of games, a lot of classic games, a couple original IPs, and I just always been really excited by like how much creativity. You say digital distribution now, and it's like, oh, yeah, obviously, like everything is distributed digitally. Like buying something retail is weird, but back then, like however long ago it is now, 15 years, it was new, it was different, and it really changed what kind of games could be made. Like you couldn't have a Castle Crashers in the days of box software. Like you could do a Castle Crashers box collector's edition now, but in the olden days, it would have been hard to convince somebody to take the risk to spend the money to make thousands and thousands of discs for this game that seemed like a really old-fashioned game type that was like hand-drawn. Like who's going to want to play that? Well, it turns out millions and millions of people, and it completely helped change an industry. But that's what digital distribution allowed, and so I was super into it. And so when the opportunity came to go from making Xbox Live Arcade games to working at Microsoft, to working with developers who were making Xbox Live Arcade games, like I didn't, I missed all my friends and you have to move, but like I didn't think a lot before. I was just like, oh yeah, we're doing that, and loaded up the family and moved to Seattle. And and so Xbox Live Arcade was like one of the greatest platforms ever for games. And as we started to get to the Xbox One generation, like two things happened. One is the indie community was growing and progressing like way faster than Microsoft could keep up with, honestly, with the level of like kind of tools and technology that we had in the back end in 360. It hadn't been architected for having hundreds and hundreds of publishers self-publishing. So we didn't allow self-publishing. Steam did, PlayStation did, and developers started to get really upset with us, and really legitimately, because we were not going as fast as the rest of the industry. So internally, we knew we had to address that, and so some people got together, folks like Fisher, Angela Hessian, myself, other people, and we were like, what do we do? Like, how do we like address this? And what we came up with was what became the ID at Xbox program. And we kind of had some fundamentals at the time that turned out to be right, which is kind of cool. Like one is we really believed in digital distribution. We really believed that this and indie developers were going to be like hugely important to the future of the game industry. I mean, this is Minecraft had already happened and was just really obvious to us anyway. And sometimes I joke, this is the only time in my life I've ever been right about something, that like these developers were going to take up all this space in the market that was going to be left behind by those sort of like mid-tier and small publishers kind of going away. And that these games were going to grow in stature, they were going to grow in size, they're going to grow in importance, and we had to be ready for them. And then, in terms of like, okay, so how do we do that? Like, what do we do? We were like, well, that part's actually not that hard. Like, it's one of these things where the strategy takes like 5 minutes to figure out, and then the implementation, it's 9 years later and we're still working on. But the strategy was just make it super easy for the devs to ship. Like, make all their problems go away. They'll all bring their games to Xbox. We already know we have this amazing, I'm biased, but also I believe this is true, like the best fan base in video games, people who love games and love trying different games and are happy to engage, digitally and everything like that. So we know we're going to have a great marketplace for these developers. If we just make it easy for them to ship, they'll bring their games to Xbox. Our players will get the broadest possible array of games, on Earth. Everyone will be happy, and then we'll get to be happy because we get to work with all these cool games to help bring them to players. And it's kind of worked, like it's easy to say make it easy for developers, and the reality is that we have like a really big team. Like I always get kind of trotted out as the face, but we have a really big team of people who makes like easy happen. And in the early days that started by doing everything by hand. Today we've replaced a lot of that hand hewn work on behalf of developers in the back end with tools and better documentation and stuff like that. But we still have like a lot of the same folks who've been here the whole time, like just working on the program and still contributing at like a super high level. So it's really kind of like awesome to see.
It's funny just listening to you talk about that. Yeah, just my mind started to wander because I think about on a personal level as a gamer, those early days with Xbox Live Arcade. You mentioned things like, Indie Booth, there's IndieCade. You think about Day of the Devs, things like that, where, and obviously Idea at Xbox, you just had your showcase where you're seeing these indie games be spotlighted. And Mike can tell you, last year, I think I became the biggest fan in the world for Death's Door, right? To see what Asset Nerve was able to do with that game, I just absolutely fell in love with it. You mentioned Tunic. I'm loving that right now as well. I'm playing Weird West, things like that. It's so funny. I always consider myself this hardcore AAA gamer type, but I'm really finding myself going more to indie games because I get excited when I see these small teams that have to take a risk, right? Do something different to stand out from the crowd, have these small budgets and be really innovative. Like I feel the innovation in this industry happens at the indie level, right? And then obviously gravitates up, to the bigger games. But I'm just curious from your standpoint, being a developer, starting out in those early days, kind of seeing how the indie landscape has evolved over the past decade or so. What do you see for the future with indie titles? Do you see this growing even more and getting more smaller studios involved in using something like Idea at Xbox to be able to spotlight them?
Yeah, I really do. And you kind of hit on something that I think is really important, just as about about innovation, right? And so, like, I actually think that if you look at AAA games, you look at Call of Duty, you look at Madden, they innovate every year. Like, those games, people like to say stuff, but the reality is, like, those devs are working super hard every year on a tight schedule to add more and more to those games. But I think that what indie developers have kind of the freedom to do is to have the really ultimately creative freedom to just pick like where they want to go deep, right? Like nobody, told, the creator of Tunic to go deep on making the most amazing manual in the history of video games and making that like part of the game, right? Like that was something that like nobody could have predicted. There's no like formula for that. That's something that like they just came up with in their head and did, and there was nobody to tell them no. Nobody at Microsoft is like, oh, well, come on, time's wasted. Let us know when it's done. And like to me, that's the beauty of indie games, and that's what's like so exciting about the past, so excited about the present, so excited about the future, is we just have like no idea what's going to come next. And I mean that like in the best possible way, right? Like it's just going to be something, bonkers and amazing. And like, and I really think that that's like just a huge, that's what makes it so exciting, like to work with these devs, and so, to have somebody on the team like, Tony Gonzalez, who's one of the folks on the ID team, like shoot you over an email, like, have you seen this? Like, it's like, oh no, I haven't. Like, what's going on? Like, we need to talk about this. Or, we in the past we've done these demo events where, during the pandemic, like, we get to like, share a bunch of demos with people, but to kind of curate those, we send out a big, open call to our development team, and Jessica Cornell on our team will get those all together. We'll all virtually get in a room and look at all the videos and work out like what's ready to show now, what maybe is going to be next time, because unfortunately we can't always include everybody every time. But like the stuff you see, like the innovation you see, is just like amazing. Like it's just like, so to me, that's what gets me up in the morning. Like, and I just don't see that changing, right? Like the the creativity that developers have with the sort of democratization of development with tools like Unreal Engine and Unity and Game Maker, and then platform access with ID at Xbox, and similar programs on PlayStation and Switch, and of course Steam and Epic Game Store and Humble and good old, there's a lot of places you can get your games out there. Like, it's just awesome. And now we're starting to see stories come. I say stories, I mean games, but I mean, developers have a story to tell, right? Like, come from all over the globe. Like, you look at a game like Coffee Talk, where unfortunately the creator just passed away, which is like brutal, but he was able to get his, this amazing game out all over the world, worldwide, from Indonesia. And that's, when was the last time you watched a TV show from Indonesia? When was the last time you read an Indonesian book, right? Like, I mean, the talent is universal. The stories that are, the things that people in Indonesia are thinking about are as important as anything else on the globe. And like, now I've gotten to play a game from Indonesia, and like, I understand people a tiny little bit better. Like, that, you can't replicate that, and I just think, I don't know. To me, I got goosebumps thinking about it. Just thinking about what like a unifying force our games are for everybody. It's just, I don't know. It stokes me out, like, for sure.
That's really exciting stuff, Chris. And man, there's so much to talk about. Is right. Let's talk about what just happened. GDC. Of course, you shared some awesome numbers that you and the team at ID at Xbox got to bring out to the world with all these indie developers. Of course, you've launched over 3,000 indie titles, 4,900 developers across 94 countries, and helped raise $2.5 billion in royalties. When you think back to the old Xbox Live arcade days, and we talk about the growth and the digital distribution, did you ever think that you and your team would be here today with all of that?
No, not at all. I'll be completely honest with you. We had a lot of faith that we would be successful, right? And because we knew how Xbox players are. We know they love video games. We know they're going to buy games. And we had faith that we were going to have this, great marketplace, and we knew that the space was growing, right? But if you had told me, like, oh, in 9 years, you're going to have paid more than $2.5 billion, I was like, that's a lot of money. That is a big number, and it's really a testament just to, like, first of all, how awesome our devs are. Like, obviously, that's like the number one thing. Like, they make this content or these games that everybody wants to experience. And then, the fact that it happens at all is like all down to like our team, folks like Jeff Carmen, folks like Timber, who's our, community manager, David Ashbrenner, who helps like run the program on the back end. Like, these are like the, people who are like making the games, ship. We're not making the games, and the games would not ship without the creators. I don't want to like take too much credit, but like doing all the heavy lifting on the Microsoft side. And so it's, whether it's, somebody like Reed, who works on like our ID setup team, or, somebody like Nick Zukic, who is on our portfolio team. It's just really cool to see like all those different people contributing and helping to just like, help creators' dreams come true and get their games out there. So it's, but could I have imagined it 9 years ago? I think I could have dreamed that I'd still be doing it in 9 years, but the amount of success developers have had, like, no, it's a magnitude bigger than I thought it would be.
So let's stick with the financial somewhat, and let's actually talk about one of the big services that Xbox obviously has for gamers, but also for devs as well, Game Pass. How, in your opinion, how is Game Pass enhance what you're doing at ID at Xbox as far as discoverability for gamers, obviously, but even with the developers? Like, we talk about all these financial numbers that they're getting on the back end. How is it actually helping developers as well with Game Pass?
Yeah, it's really helping, and it's hard to like talk about the exact business relationship.
Right.
Obviously, developers are not giving us games to put into Game Pass for free, right? So you can assume that they're well compensated. What's cool about it to me is how much of a virtuous cycle it is, because you've got developers who get a game into Game Pass. They get really fair compensation. Then now this game is available to millions and millions and millions of players to download, at no additional cost other than the cost of their membership and just the time it takes to download. And because that collection is curated, the games are good, right? Like, you might not be into every single game in Game Pass. Like, you could download a game from Game Pass and be like, okay, next, but
Right.
they're good, right? You might not like, I know that I don't like every game, but I can tell if a game is good even if I don't like it, all that kind of thing. And so that to me is just like it's a really great thing. And I'm old, but I still remember like being a little kid and going to the video store and just seeing like all the games, and and you can get one, right? This weekend you can get one, and if you don't return it on Sunday, you're in like the whole thing. But you just had that possibility space of like, I can get anything, and like, well, okay, I'm going to get Wall Street Kid, or or something weird, because you just want to like see what that is. And it wasn't always a great choice. I don't exactly recommend people go out and track down Wall Street Kid for the NES, but I think that Game Pass has that same kind of feeling of just kind of like infinite novelty. There's like always something to try, and I think for a long time the tagline for Game Pass was "Find your next favorite game," and I still think that's just a great tagline, because that's what it's all about. It's about just like trying a bunch of stuff, seeing what you like, and then just like finding something, discovering something new, and having that feeling of like, look, there's lots and lots of long-standing franchises that I love, that I get every edition of, and I play every one, but you kind of know what you're going to get, and that's fine, because it's satisfying. Like, it's comfortable to like play a game where you kind of know what you're going to get, but it's going to be a little different. But when you play like you're done playing a franchise game, and you kind of have that pause where you're going to like, all right, what next? And you just download something weird. You just take a flyer on a game. Maybe it's strange, maybe you just don't know about it, maybe it's got cool box art, whatever, and you just discover something that it kind of, I found corny, and I know it, but like it kind of brings like all the fun of like that first time you ever played a video game back. You know what I mean? That just that sense where there's just like, there's no boundaries, and you can kind of go and do anything. So to me, that's what I love about Game Pass. And you mentioned the financials, and I think they're really important, because devs have questions, or how are we doing with if I'm not in Game Pass, does that hurt me? If I am in Game Pass, does that hurt me? And all I can say is we look at those numbers all the time. Like, I've just been working with one of our data folks, who's brilliant person, about like, well, what does happen to games that aren't in Game Pass? Like, how does that affect things? And I can't say the exact results of the research, but
Right.
I can say that we were both smiling at the end, right? and that felt good. And then when it comes to Game Pass itself, the best thing that we can look at in terms of like thinking like, okay, we know this is working for developers, and we know this is working for us, or we know this is working for players, right? And we know how we're doing. But like, how is it working for developers? And to me, the thing there that we get is this kind of extrinsic affirmation from devs who, a lot of people would sign one game into Game Pass just to experiment, just to see what the ecosystem does. But when they come to us and they want to do a second game, a third game, a fourth game, a fifth game, a sixth game, like, okay, it's working for them. Like, and we can feel comfortable that as developers are, constantly reaching out to us about Game Pass and wanting to be included after they've already been included, we know that it's working for them, and it must be working. We have pretty good modeling, so we're pretty comfortable it's working financially, but them saying they want to be included again tells us, okay, this really must be working for them financially. And then also creatively, like there is a buzz when you have worked on a million selling game, or a game that's been played by 1 million players. Like, I can't explain it. It's kind of like, why is it cool having a game on console? I don't know, because it is like, it's just special. And like, working on something where you're like, okay, 1 million people see my game is like, I've only had it happen, when I was a developer, like, well, I don't know if it ever happened when I was a developer, but I'm in the credits for Minecraft on Xbox. I got it there.
Nice.
And it's just really special. And so I think we kind of help deliver, that kind of feeling to devs too. And then the final thing, sorry, I know I'm chatty, is
please,
that, like, a dev gets their game into Game Pass, and meanwhile their game is on Steam, it's on Epic, it's on PlayStation, it's on Nintendo. Now everybody's talking about the game because millions of people are playing it on Xbox, that's giving them like so much awareness for the game on all platforms that it ends up being like a really, I think, again, I use the word virtuous again, just like a really like virtuous thing for the whole game industry. And and I promise I'll shut up. The last thing is like there is financial compensation for Game Pass, and there are probably I can say definitively, there's games that wouldn't exist without Game Pass being there to provide a place for them, and I think that's really kind of cool. Like I don't know another way to put it, but like that's neat, and I think that helps the industry. And I've got somebody in the background. Carrie, I'm on a podcast. How's it going?
Yeah. If I could jump in on that point that you just made, and I'll give it to you, Mike. See, to me, when I look at it, because people give us a hard time about talking about Game Pass on the show a lot, but we are an Xbox show, so what do you think? But to me, that point that you just made about certain games not existing if that service wasn't here is a big point, because when I talk about the risk that these small studios have, where I always think back to a game like Disintegration. I guess it was kind of an indie game, kind of not. But that game, the concept of it was fantastic, I always thought. And I felt like it almost came out during the pandemic and almost got sent out to die. And that studio doesn't exist anymore. Whereas I think of things like that where at least this gives these smaller studios and these developers some cushion to take a risk, to put something innovative out there that maybe necessarily they wouldn't otherwise without a service like this and having some upfront financial backing. So I'm glad you said that, because we need more of this in the industry. I want to see more unique things come out of game instead of the same thing over and over. So I'm very excited to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think Game Pass is awesome. I think it's proven itself to be really great. And that doesn't mean a game has to be in Game Pass to succeed, but I think that it's just another way for people to discover games for sure.
Shout out to MapleStory for sponsoring this episode. After 17 years of rich MMO gameplay wrapped in a unique 2D side-scroller, MapleStory is ready to proudly lean into its cute pixelated aesthetic. The aggressively cute campaign aims to showcase the unexpected juxtaposition of cuddly, smiley characters with rich, multi-layered MMO gameplay. The campaign focuses on telling a story of immense character customization, a vast array of weapons and mounts to choose from, a seemingly endless horizon of lands to explore and battle, all while dealing huge amounts of damage to monsters of all shapes and sizes. I know a lot of people out there love MapleStory, so hey, come check out this armed and adorable campaign. This is your world. With over 40 classes and thousands of cosmetic customization options, you can play how you want, and there's just so much good stuff. 18 years of content, no signs of slowing, means you'll never get bored. You can go to maplestory.nexon.net. That's maplestory.nexon.net for more, or you can just click the link in the description. This episode is brought to you by MeUndies. I love MeUndies. You guys have heard me talk about MeUndies for years at this point. I'm always wearing the MeUndies shirt, the MeUndies lounge pants, the MeUndies undies, the MeUndies socks. I can go on and on and on. If MeUndies putting out a product, chances are Tim Geddes is wearing them. The MeUndies membership is literally designed to make your life easier, with free shipping and returns on every order, savings on virtually everything they make, exclusive sales, and early access to their newest stuff. There's kind of no reason not to join. Get super soft undies, bralettes, or socks shipped directly to your door and live a more comfortable life knowing you always have what you need at your fingertips when you step out of the shower. MeUndies has a great offer for all of you. Any first-time purchasers, you can get 15% off. For a limited time, if you sign up for their free-to-join MeUndies membership, you can get 25% off your first membership item. To get 25% off your first membership item or 15% off your first order and 100% satisfaction guarantee, go to MeUndies.com/KindaFunny. That's MeUndies.com/KindaFunny.
That's really awesome, Parris. I love that what you brought up about the risk, right? And the idea of these games coming out and like, would there be a market for that? A perfect one is Unpacking, right? We talked about it and how much we loved Unpacking.
Yeah.
Like, you brought that to any boardroom, or you told your friends, oh, this is a game about unpacking your belongings. Nobody's going to want to play that. Nobody's going to even listen to you. But through the power of Game Pass, like, we all fell in love with that game.
Yeah, and that's another one where you hear the core idea of the game, or you're unpacking, and you're like, and then you play the first level, and you're like, oh yeah, this is cute. Oh, I got to find a little space for everything. And you're like, oh, I can kind of like put it the way I want it. And then you think, oh, this is a neat little game. and then you start to realize the story, right? And it's just like, it just lets you find it. And then, then it was just like, oh, wow, this is like, I moved in with this dude and now there's no place for my stuff, and that whole thing, like, it just really was cool. And then for me, I just was putting away CDs or DVDs, and I was like, wait a minute, I know what movie that is. And all of a sudden I had to look at every single DVD in the game, trying to figure out like what they were and everything like that. It's just such a neat moment.
I guess that's why I'll kick it to you, Chris, because you've been doing this for so long. You've seen games that have taken some big risks like that. Do any pop out to you? Because I think of Paparazzi, right? That least recently came out. I think of how off the wall that is, but how much people vibed with that and are into that. Are there games that you've looked at before and said, man, that is like a wild idea, and then you've seen it actually succeed?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just go to the canonical one is Cuphead, right? Like this, team, this family that has never shipped a game before, that have no game industry experience. It's like work in marketing and construction. They read about Unity someplace or hear about it someplace and decide to like make a game because they grew up on the Master System and the Genesis. And they also grew up on like lo-fi public domain VHS animation tapes that their parents got them at the grocery store, and then decide to make Cuphead. And I mean, talk about risky, hand drawing every frame, taking a long time to make the game, and doing something like literally nobody's ever done before. And their first game, oh my God, I will say, you knew the game was going to be good, right? And you knew the game was going to be gorgeous, but like, the game is so fun. Like, I mean, it's so perfectly polished and tuned and everything else. But they took so many risks, and in talking to them once, just saying like, why did you take so many risks? You didn't have to take that many risks. They were like, well, and I think they said this in interviews, well, if this one doesn't work, we'll probably never make another game. So there's no reason we shouldn't put our all into it. And I respect that, so much. It's scary, the risks that developers take. And I don't necessarily recommend taking the risks, all those risks that they took, but it did really pay off for them. And yeah, but that's the canonical one where it's like out of left field, super risky. And then, turns out it worked out for everybody. So it's cool.
So one more from me. Two-parter. Number one, do you have a Steam Deck? And if you do, I'm jealous.
Oh my. Oh my, he did it again.
You know I have to do it. No, but on a serious note, the part two of that, the Steam Deck, with the invention of this, and obviously, it's hard to find because I still want one, but what do you see the potential of that for indie games? To me, it just screams that this could be like kind of the perfect go-to device for some of these smaller indie titles, to basically play wherever you want.
Yeah, well, I think I don't have one either. I say is going to be secondhand, but look, I think the bottom line is like more endpoints for developers to get their games out there, right, like the better, right? That's one of the things we're doing with Project xCloud, which is basically, right, play games wherever you are, like play them on your phone, play them on your PC, play them on your iPad, and I think that's what it's all about. For developers, especially smaller developers, they need their games to be lots of different places so that people can, they can have the best chance of getting them discovered.
I want to talk about discoverability with you, Chris, because it was really cool. We just got off of course, GDC with you, but also the ID at Xbox and Twitch showcase. And this is something kind of an evolution we've seen with your team of, I know a lot of Xbox players love discoverability. They love seeing what's next on the platform. And when we think of E3s in the past, we had the ID at Xbox moment, right? The little segment. And then you talked about you and your team starting to kind of sprinkle in the ID at Xbox different trailers throughout E3 instead of just being one big montage. Now you've moved into your own showcase itself. What has that been like for your team to kind of evolve that? Does that mean a lot to y'all?
Yeah, it's been awesome. And, Glenn and Teo are our marketing folks who work on that. Like, they do like a killer job. And yeah, it's been really interesting to see that evolution. Because, yeah, we did have a few E3s where we're like, we'll showcase ID games, showcase indie games to make sure, people understand like these are cool and know what cool stuff is coming. And that worked great. And then, we finally got to the point where we're like, okay, there's too many. Like, not too many. There's never too many. Right. But you know what I mean? Like, this section is not, it doesn't need to be a section anymore. Like, people get it. They just love video games. Just put these games where they want to be in the show. And I think, like, that's, like, worked out, like, super, super well. But at the same time, people are always asking us, like, well, what else is there? Like, you guys need to do a direct. We need to see more. And, and that's, like, great feedback. And, so we've been working with Twitch to put these showcases together, and I think they're just like a fantastic way to showcase just all the breadth and diversity of games that are coming. Highlight some things that are really neat that maybe like don't have their trailer ready for the E3 deadline, or the summer deadline, but they have it ready when it's ready, and or they want to do a surprise announcement or something like that. And so it's just been really, really cool, and it's cool to see the reaction. It's fun to look at the Twitch comments, which scroll by very quickly, and see what folks have to say. It's been it's been really neat, and it's just another way to help get the word out there about these games. And I assure you, like, we're constantly looking on our side, just meeting with the ID team, whether it's Chloe and Guy or or whoever, just to think about, brainstorm like new ways to break games for people. Not like break games, but you know what I mean? Like break games out and give people an opportunity to see things. And I don't have anything to announce, but like I can say we are constantly looking for new ways to do that. And some ideas you work on for a really long time, and then you're like, not the best, like. And sometimes things happen. So I don't know, maybe something will happen in the future.
Well, you may not be able to say anything, but I would like to throw out a wish list and
say, please.
I would love, and again, knock on wood, we get completely out of this pandemic that we've been in the past couple of years, and we can go back to in-person events. I would love to see a dedicated ID at Xbox in-person event so people can get together, get hands-on with these games. Developers are there. You can have those in-person conversations and really understand the process and everything that goes with, making an indie title, and, why, someone like myself appreciates it so much. I just think it'll bring even more awareness, to the ID at Xbox program and just indie games overall. So I would love to see that if that ever happened.
I think that would be awesome. I would love to see it too. We used to do a thing right before PAX. We did an open house on like the Microsoft campus before PAX. And it was really, really fun. And it was so, I don't know what the grassroots, I guess. Like the first year we did it, we didn't know if anyone was going to show up. We had a bunch of developers, and we had a bus that brought them over from PAX, and like people were showing up, and we're like, should we order pizzas? And then we just like ordered, we called Domino's, and we're like, we need everything like now, and it was just so fun. It's such a great community of players and developers that when you can like actually get everybody together on the show floor, like everybody together, it's just something really, really special. And of course, the pandemic has kind of put that on hiatus, but hopefully in the future, I would love to do it again, and not just in Redmond, although it's fun to do it at like home base, but right. To do like other places. I think that's like probably one of the last like frontiers of accessibility for gamers, is really like not everybody can go to PAX, not everybody can go to E3 or whatever the summer event is, and like how do you, I don't know, like I think that's, but it's you guys have done it, right? And so you know how special it is, and it's a different energy, and so I just that would be neat. So
yeah, I mean, and the last thing on that, I mean, because I think it's great, like again, to bring Tunic back into the conversation. Like last year, there was the Tunic demo, you got to play and things like that. I could do it at home. It's great, but I think, like you just said, it's a different energy when you can do that stuff in person. Like you take it to the before times. Like I remember, Xbox would have like their media showcases. You would have some indie titles there. You would have some in the show floor mixed in with some of the bigger games. But I think having an event dedicated specifically to those type of titles would just be amazing and just do so much for, for the indie landscape in the industry.
Yeah, that would be, I mean,
sounds
I
rad.
think it would be cool.
Let's talk about the before times, because Chris, I've heard a lot of stories as I've done my research on you of you enjoying walking through the indie mega booths, right? We talked about Day of the Devs. Of course, we all miss that, right? But what are some of those memories? I mean, I think of Greg Miller really pushing me to go to Day of the Devs before the whole world changed, right? And it was an outstanding moment to me as a gamer, right? To meet the hardworking men and women and folks who make these games that I never really understood, to be able to shake their hand and listen to the stories. I mean, I'm sure you have 100 of them, right? Is there anything that stands out to you?
I'm trying to think. Like, yeah, I mean, just meeting. I remember getting to meet the House team, the Untitled Goose Game folks at like a Day of the Devs, and that was really neat. And just other things were like to me, like the way I would do a PAX is I would try to schedule no meetings. Like GDC, I'm like back to back the whole time. And then PAX, especially PAX East in the olden days, I would just like book no meetings in advance. There'd always be a couple, and all I would do is I would just snake the entire show and just go to every single booth and play every single game. And it was so cool. I remember meeting like the Chainsaw Awesome guys there, the guys who did Night Squad, which is a really fun like 8-player multiplayer game on Xbox and probably other places too. And but I'd never heard of the game before. I'd never seen the game before. They had some really nice like foam letters, I was kind of like intrigued by, and went up and met them, and next thing you know, like 6 months later, 8 months later, the game's on Xbox. And that's happened like so many times. Just getting to it is something special about just like getting to like meet the devs and have them demo the game for you. I know like just having the team show me Demon Stilt Pinball is like different than just wandering by Demon Stilt Pinball, so I love it. I really do miss those times, and I miss getting to just like hang out with developers, because they're in addition to being like super talented at making video games, what comes with that usually is they're like smart, funny, engaging people who are like fun to talk about video games with. And so whether you're agreeing with each other, whether you're arguing or debating or whatever, like those kind of moments where you're in a hotel lobby and you're there's like 3 or 4 people just gathered around just like chatting about games, is like that's something that's just really special. And it doesn't happen right now the way it did then. It's just something about that kind of in-person thing that we don't have right now.
Do you and your team feel that, like, we've gone through 2 years of this now? Have you and your team found ways to alleviate some of that feeling of, man, this isn't the same? Have you found good ways to stay in touch with these developers and make that connection?
Yeah, I mean, some of it you just have to be a little bit more intentional. You just have to like have meetings and talk to folks. And then some of it, like we've done a couple meetings where we just schedule meetings, with people where we don't have a lot to discuss, like from a business point of view, like and we're just like really catching up to like see how they're doing and shoot the breeze and that kind of thing. And those are some of the most fun meetings. But I will say I think we all kind of been there where we feel like, okay, we're doing as good as we can during this pandemic. Like, and then you go to like that one in-person dinner with like people you don't know, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, but as good as we could during the pandemic is not even close to how much fun it is getting to meet new people and hearing their stories and everything like that. So yeah, we've tried, but like I just don't know if there's a good replacement for meeting people in person.
I have 2 more things before I let you go. Let's talk about GDC, because we shared the numbers we just talked about, but you and your team have evolved ID at Xbox and what you do with developers. Of course, the recently announced ID at Azure program. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Shine some light on how we've evolved that, because it went from 2 dev kits and, you guys trying to be, hey, yes, we can make that answer happen. What does this do to elevate that?
Yeah, so this is an example where we we talk to developers all the time and listen to developers all the time about, hey, what do they want? How can we make things easier? And, people are starting to talk about cloud services for games. And of course, like, you've got AWS, you've got Google has a cloud product, you've got Azure, and but a lot of these things are kind of architected for, it's not always simple to do, and kind of architected for bigger teams, right? And so, we were talking, and just the question is like, well, how do we bring this to like everybody, and we know, we were talking about it before, like, we know that when we enable digital distribution, we saw an explosion of games like we've never seen before, whether it's a Cuphead or, Castle Crashers or anything that are just like completely unique and special and different than anything else existed. And that's what great developers do when they get new technology. They just figure out a way to like do something awesome. And so it's like, well, what if we enable cloud technology and, and do it kind of with the same sort of attitude and style as ID at Xbox? The person who's leading it, Nick Ferguson, actually was on the original V team for ID at Xbox before he ended up going away and working someplace else for a few years, and then just came back. And so, yeah, we put together an offer, and it's in, it's called ID, but it's important to stress it's not, it's not about Xbox. It's about like cloud gaming everywhere. So whether it's Android, iOS, PlayStation, Switch, PC, Linux, Xbox too, of course. But it's really about like enabling your games with cloud technology, whether that's, server stuff, or whether that's even for like a single player game, putting in telemetry so you can see where people are getting stuck or how people are behaving in certain ways, like who finds this secret, who finds this manual page here. Not that, Tunic is enabled with that, but I'm just saying, like, as an example, that's the kind of thing that a developer could do, and it helps them either, maybe they could update if they had made a puzzle too hard and they can see people are really getting stuck, or they could signpost, or they could just think about what they do for their next project. And that's the kind of stuff that that's just like one example of like 1,000 that we think developers are going to do with it. But of course, like always, the thing we're really excited about is seeing them do the things that we can't even imagine, right? Like the things where we're like, oh, you can do that, and you did. That's awesome. So yeah.
All right, guys, I want to end the show with some fun. Of course, Chris, here on the KindaFunny Xcast, I get Parris Lilly and Gary Whitta. We call them my two gaming dads, and I get to have them tell me awesome stories. We get to share the fun of video games. And of course, you're here, and you brought up an awesome one of Xbox Live Arcade and Geometry Wars. And I'm sure everyone watching and listening, their ears perked up, because when you talk Xbox Live Arcade, you bring up Geometry Wars, everybody gets excited to share stories. So I would be remiss if I didn't have you two share some stories from back in the day of Xbox Live Arcade. So Chris and Parris, I'll kick it to you first. Any special Xbox Live Arcade stories you can share with me? Favorite games, anything like that?
Man, I'm trying to think. Like, we already talked about Geometry Wars. Oh my God, and it's killing me now. It was like a bug game. God, you would put me first. Now I gotta think about it.
Is it a bug sale?
No, not bugs. I'm screwing it up. I'm trying to think, because I'm thinking specifically Xbox Live Arcade. There was this bug game. It was called Bug Hominid. Is that right? Alien Hominid? Alien Hominid.
Yeah, Alien Hominid.
It's
from the same. It's from the Behemoth, the same folks that did Castle Crashers.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
That one. That was a game that I remember playing back in the day. The one memory I do have about Xbox Live Arcade, it's not playing the game specifically, but it was the memory limitation. So actually, I don't know. Maybe you have some insight on this, Chris. I remember there was the memory limitation. At what point did that go? Because that went away at some point, right? Because I know that was holding things back.
It was, and I wasn't working at Xbox then, but yeah, the original memory limitation was, I want to say it might have been 50 megs or something like that. Because it had to fit on the memory card, because not every 360 had a hard drive. There were those versions you could get that didn't have a hard drive right at the very beginning. And so it had to fit on a memory card. But then eventually there was some game that was too big, but, and so these kind of policies, even today, these kind of policies are put in for a reason. And then when people are like, oh, well, this is actually, it's something different, the policies can get, changed and relaxed. And, and so they've eventually changed it because there was a game that was too big. And I forget what the next size was, but I do know that then there was a third game that was even bigger. And then they were just like,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
Chris, how about yourself? I mean, you are the Xbox Live Arcade guy. I'm sure you've played them all. What is some of the ones that stand out to you that you remember?
Yeah, for me, it really is still Geometry Wars 2 because I still play the game all the time. And but when I hear Xbox Live and I think memories, I just think of Halo though, because like
Oh, yes.
even before
Yeah.
like I remember showing people Xbox Live Arcade. I had a bunch of people over for a LAN party, and Xbox Live Arcade originally came on a disc, right? Like it originally was like a disc that you put into your OG Xbox, and it could play like Miss Pac-Man and things. And but the original Halo, like LAN party, like that era, like early 2000s or whatever, like to me is like was just so. I think everybody's got this with games, like different games, different times, but it's just so foundational to like all the people who'd come over, and like so many of them went on to like. So we worked at a little developer. We'd get like 12, 16 people over in a tiny room with like TVs everywhere, or 4 TVs, and screen cheating, the whole thing, and just cook a tri-tip, like just smoke a tri-tip out in the backyard, and just play for hours. I played for like 8-10 hours just without stopping. And how many of the folks who went on to like go work at Bungie, like on Halo and now on Destiny, is like we had at least 3 people from that crew go there. Like I ended up at Xbox, other people ended up like lots of different places, including a guy who ended up at 343. And actually there's in the Master Chief collection, there's a achievement called Back in the Day, and I think it says Back in the Day, and I think you get it for playing a Blood Gulch with everything turned on, that's what we did, and then I think the subtitle for the achievement is Tri-Tip optional, and so like that feels like kind of cool. I don't think you can see it; it's back there, but I have the traveling trophy that we had for those
Nice.
days, like back next to my TV, and like to me that was when I fell in love, you know what I mean, with Xbox. And so like,
oh yeah,
can never forget those days.
Have you been jumping into Halo Infinite? Of course, the big flagship title. It's been released. Everybody's been enjoying it. What do you think so far of it? Have you been having fun?
I think I'm not as good at first-person shooters as I used to. That's what I've learned, is that you sort of, I don't know if you age into third-person shooters or you just age into playing chess. I don't know. I still love it. And it's gorgeous and it's really fun. But I think like I might be on the other side of that hill at some point.
Parris, I see you smiling. Have you thought of some other Xbox Live Arcade titles at all?
Well, no, it was funny because you said that. I'm like, I'm losing my mind. I had to make sure it was Alien Hominid that I was talking about. But like Limbo is another one.
Limbo, yep.
That oh my gosh, as well. Yeah, that was another one from back in the day.
But Limbo and Inside are still just like those are like. I never play games early. Like I always want to wait till they come out because I don't know why, it's my thing. But Inside I got to build early as soon as I knew it was done, and just like locked myself down in this basement, turned out all the lights. This was before we could change the brightness on the guide button. So I like put like a Post-it over the guide button and the Xbox button, just make it as dark as possible, and just like played that game, and like, oh, it looked amazing.
I'm a Castle Crashers kid. Growing up, that was a big thing for me. Of course, Tale of Two Brothers. Everybody loves that one. They'll bring that up. And I just think of the evolution, right? I think of Gotham City Imposters, right? Because you bring up the idea of like that game probably would never have shipped as like a physical big time title. Right. And because of that, I was able to play a really fun game with my friends, right? And to see the evolution as we've gone on, right? I think of Nobody Saves the World, right? We had them on a Kind of Funny Twitch stream and got to talk with that dev team all about it. Sayonara Wild Hearts, a game I would probably never play, but really connected with and love to this day, right? And so I've had a lot of great memories with that, and I'm so lucky and thankful for all of that fun stuff that we've done. I have 2 final questions. One is about digital distribution and kind of the marketplace. We think of Xbox Live Arcade, and we talk about, of course, Summer of Arcade, right? And I've listened to a lot of your interviews over the time. And do you think, when we talked about Summer Arcade, you kind of brought up, like, I don't know if we could ever do that again because we had all these titles, this and that. But now when me and Parris read through the Game Pass updates each and every month, you have so many titles. Do you ever think you would be at that point as well?
Oh, this many games? No, I never did. I didn't know the industry would be at this point. But yeah, I mean, like Summer of Arcade was so cool. Like, I wish there's just not. It was like a special moment in time. I don't know if you can ever replicate it. You know what I mean? I think there's other things that are really, really cool that we'll do and that we do now. But that one is just like that's just like crystallized. That was like a moment. Like Woodstock. I don't know. Like that's how to describe it.
Yeah, it was a really cool moment. But what I want to get into is the storefront. Of course, we've moved into a new generation. The team over there has always elevated what the UI is. And now really the storefront for me, I've talked about it with Parris and Gary of like, this feels like the ultimate blockbuster experience to me of when you go to the Xbox Live storefront, you see trailers pop up, music will start playing. There's got movie trailers. Like, are you impressed with the storefront now? And are you happy with what you see with the ID at Xbox, titles getting there, doing their spotlight on that? Is there anywhere for improvement? Are you happy right now with that?
Yes and yes, right? So I was super happy. There's, ID at Xbox games get like an enormous amount of love on the store. I think the work that the store team does is fantastic. I think the store is really, really good. That said, if you talk to the store team, they're constantly talking about ways they can improve it. If you talk to, you look on Reddit, you talk to anybody, we all have a million ideas about how to improve it. And the thing I sometimes joke about is like, we had like as a species, we had like 10,000 years to figure out how to do like a real store, right? Like starting in Mesopotamia and, ending in, like whatever, Walmart. And we're only like 15 years into digital stores. So there's definitely going to be like a lot of improvement and a lot more we can do. But I think what we have now is great. I just think like, there's just there's always ways we can do it better, right? And so those are things we think about all the time. How do we showcase the games better? How do we make the experience more seamless and kind of low friction for players? So you're just, just going through there and having fun, and we think about that stuff constantly.
All right, final question for me, a fun one. Chris, I hear you're a skater, right? And I know you like to get out there. Yeah. We have gone through years of the pandemic, so I have to check in. Have you been getting out, at least riding down the block, or have you just been playing Tony Hawk Ride like me in your living room to keep up your skate skills?
No, I can see a bunch of skateboards behind that wall. Yeah, I had in 2020 they closed my skate park and filled the skate park with like old fences because of pandemic reasons, which it's outside. Turns out now we know maybe it would have been okay. Where so summer 2020 was a wash. I got some good parking structure skating in, and then summer 21 I fell, not skateboarding. I just fell down some stairs and cracked a bunch of ribs. So that was that was a wash too. So now we're into 22. I've been skateboarding this weekend. It's like pretty nice in Seattle right now. I've been getting out there. I'm terrible. I can just push around, but like I can at least flow around the park a little bit and go fast and slow and try not to end up in the hospital. And I will say this, at GDC a lot of people were kind of bagging on me because my phone is shattered. Like I look like I don't know if you guys are gonna be able to see this, but I look like a middle schooler. Like this thing is just in pieces. And but it happened skateboarding, and so it's like every time I look at this broken phone, I'm like, that happened because I did something on a skateboard and my phone flew out of my pocket and smashed. And so it's like, it is kind of like a little bit of a souvenir. So I haven't replaced the phone yet.
Skate 4 is just so far away, Chris. What have you been doing on the virtual front to like kind of get that skater mentality out? Because I've been playing a lot of Shredders, and that's an ID at Xbox game, and I love Shredders. Have you been doing that? What have you been doing to get your skate fix in virtually?
I have played some Ollie Ollie World and then but mostly I get my skateboarding for real, and then I gotta admit, like a little bit of Skate 3 doesn't hurt anybody. So
good. I like that a lot. Chris, it's been a blast.
Yeah.
Parris, I'm gonna look to you. One final question or anything to say to Chris before we wrap up this episode?
No, I think I'm all out of questions. I just want to thank you, Chris, for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us about ID at Xbox and just your history through the industry that's led you up to this point. I mean, it's been fantastic. Thank you.
For sure. Thank you guys. I really appreciate the time, and I feel like cool I got to be on this podcast. And tell Gary I said hi. I guess, and we used to work together. So yeah, thanks a lot. It's cool to be here. So thank you.
We definitely will. And thank you, Chris, for everything you do. Make sure to share that with the team, as they deserve all the credit as well. But it's been a blast with you. And
100%.
hopefully all of our viewers and watchers out there have had a good time. This is another Kind of Funny Xcast in the books. Of course, that's Chris Charla, the head of ID at Xbox. You got to share some stories and hear all about the work that him and his team do for Microsoft and Xbox. That's Parris Lilly. I'm Snowbike Mike. And on behalf of the whole Kind of Funny Xcast crew, thank you for watching and listening. We'll catch you next week. Peace out.